And good morning, everybody. Welcome to the July 19th, 2020 episode of Cyber and Security Stream. My name is Neil Bridges, and thank you for joining me today. If this is your first time joining us for the stream, our mission is really here to elevate the conversation around cybersecurity and make it more digestible for a broader audience. As ironic as it would be, I found a really good tweet from a pretty predominant influencer in the cybersecurity industry I'm going to share with everybody today. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, we stream from 5 to 7 Central Time. Now, today we're streaming on Sunday, pretty early in the morning, about 8 o'clock here Central Time. We tried to stream yesterday, but had some technical difficulties trying to integrate some new equipment into the stream. So I decided to bump the stream to today, and so we're going to accomplish that stream today versus yesterday's stream. The reason we do it so frequently, right, is because cybersecurity is in such a state of flux that there's always something for us to talk about. And our goal here is really to focus on multiple aspects of the industry, whether you're an experienced veteran, whether you're new to the field, or whether whether you barely know how to spell cyber or somebody who's born in cyber. This stream is really for you. Now, we are multicast streaming across 3 different platforms, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, to ensure that we hit a large demographic of all ages and all skill levels. We're hoping to get approval here before long to stream on LinkedIn, and we'll let you know when that happens. Passive aggressive plug to anybody who's listening from LinkedIn who can help us get approved on LinkedIn. In the meantime, if you find these streams helpful, please don't hesitate to hit that follow button if you're on Twitch. Hit that subscribe button if you're over there on YouTube, or like us on Facebook. And if you're looking for us on Twitter, you can find us at IT Junkie. Okay. Now that those logistics are out of the way, let's talk a little bit about our schedule for today. Okay. If you heard me last Wednesday during our stream, as a matter of fact, towards the end of the stream, we our text messages and chats started to blow up pretty massively around the Twitter hack. So we were to hit a little bit of it on Wednesday during the end of the stream. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of details that were emerging, so we didn't have a whole lot to talk about. And then again on Thursday, when I did my weekly podcast with Insecurity, we talked a little bit about the Twitter hack as well on Thursday. And so today we're going to kind of do a deep dive on demystifying the Twitter hack. There's a lot of stuff that you can read out there, and so we're not going to rehash everything that's read out there. We're really going to kind of dive deep into talking about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about some SIM swapping, and then we're going to kind of break up the conversation between administrative access to panels, to centralized control, stuff like they had for Twitter. We're going to talk about insider threat, and then we're going to talk about any future potential impacts that could come from something like this. We have a small section that's going to talk about, a new FBI warning that's come out about how cyber criminals are spoofing, airport websites and Wi-Fi, especially for travelers during this COVID time period. And then we're going to kind of do a new section towards the end of the stream where we're actually going to go to Reddit and go to our NetSec students, and we're actually going to answer some Reddit posts virtually. And provide our responses to some of the things that are going on Reddit as well. So hopefully you find that interesting. As always, if there's topics you'd like for us to cover, things you'd like to see us cover more or less of, then please don't hesitate to drop us a comment in any of the comment fields, or shoot us a tweet with an @ mention, and we'll definitely look out for you. Okay. As promised, one of the first things I kind of wanted to share with everybody, right? This is a tweet from Dino Diazovi, who he does security for Cash App. He's done security for Square. He's previous CTO and co-founder of several companies, as well as a very publicized author. And this tweet I saw yesterday, and I really wanted to share it with everybody on stream, because I think that this really encapsulates a lot of why it is that we do the stream that we're doing. Right? Is in this tweet, you can see that, his one of the thoughts that he had yesterday was that a lot of cybersecurity field is focused on honing the deepest subject matter expertise possible, but that is needed at maybe 5 companies tops. Everywhere else needs general security knowledge to be more broadly applied throughout the company. And he follows on to say, that means that your ability to inspire non-security practitioners to think about security and share the responsibility is an infinitely more valuable skill than being able to lock yourself in a basement for months and emerge with something ultra double plus plus leet. For those who have never seen leet speak before, it's just kind of a fun way in which the hacker community developed a way to try to talk to each other. The reason I like this tweet very much is this is very much how and why I started cyber insecurity as a stream, and why I do these types of talks. I could absolutely be that guy who locks himself in the basement and comes out with something. We could sit here and we can have these streams and we could go deep on every possible pen testing thing or offensive hacking thing that I've ever learned in my entire career, and I'm sure that a lot of you would find that beneficial and enjoyable. But my goal is to bring the conversation to a lot more folks than just those people, right? I want to have a conversation about cybersecurity with everybody. There are so many questions that people have out there with cybersecurity. There are so many topics that people want to have covered, and there's such a gap of knowledge between those of us who do this stuff on a regular basis, and those who don't. And so this tweet very much reminded me of our mission and reminded me of what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. And so as you're coming to the stream, right, take a step back away from any preconceptions you have about trying to go deep and learn how to write buffer overflow exploits. Lord knows I've done my share of exploit development. I've taken several exploit development classes, and I've written several exploits on my own as well, and really take a step back and try to understand that we're trying to have a broader cybersecurity conversation. We're trying to bring new people into the career field, and we're trying to make sure that everybody has a good experience and can have that inspiration as non-security practitioners to always think about security and always kind of know what it means, and always be able to carry that thought forward. And so if you're here for the first time, welcome. If you're here without a whole lot of cybersecurity expertise and knowledge, welcome. Please feel free to utilize that chat. We've got moderators standing by who are, who can answer any questions that you may have. I'll be here on stream. We can answer any questions you may have. We would absolutely love to have your engagement. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to our primary topic for the evening. Kind of one of our bigger ones, right, is the demystifying the Twitter hack. Now, we'll kind of rewind a little bit to last Wednesday's stream. We were on stream last Wednesday, and towards the end of the stream, my text messages and chats started to blow up, and started to talk about something that was happening in Twitter. And so during one of the breaks, I quickly ran out and tried to see what we could find about what was going on. And lo and behold, Twitter was undergoing some type of hack. And little was known about it at the time. All that we really had was kind of this support message that we had here from Twitter support that said that they are currently aware of a security incident that's impacting accounts on Twitter that they were investigating. Ultimately, that's a good thing, right? We want to see rapid acknowledgement of security incidents. The tweets kind of continued. They locked down the ability to reset passwords and things like that. And so obviously this kind of led us to believe that something had happened specifically around user access of certain accounts, and obviously some of us really got kind of worried up front because we had thought of some type of credential breach. Somebody had gained access to some database that had credentials of everybody on Twitter, and so that really kind of started to get the juices rolling quickly as to what type of damage. You hear me refer to the plume pretty frequently, but what type of plume could have potentially happened from this type of attack. And then later that night they started to restore Twitter access. They indicated about 9:30 that they had they were continuing their investigation, but they were at least able to release what they knew so far. And this is where we kind of get to the crux of where most of us were interested in, right? So about 9:38 p.m. Now, I'll tell you right now, this is, we like this in the security industry. This is transparency, at its finest, right? They knew that something had happened. They knew the entire world was watching them, and so as a result, they went ahead and took the initiative to try and, kind of get out in front of it and let people know that yes, there was indeed some type of cyber attack that had happened. And so in this case, they had admitted that they had detected what they believed to be a coordinated social engineering attack by people who successfully targeted some of their employees with access to internal systems and tools. So let's break this down a little bit, right? Social engineering. Whenever you hear terms like phishing, as a matter of fact, if you go back a couple streams ago, right, we actually specifically talked about the know before and security awareness. And so social engineering, right, is that ability as an attacker to trick you as a user into divulging something that you otherwise shouldn't have divulged in the first place. In this case, it looks like they were attacking some of the employees of Twitter that ultimately had access to internal systems. And so now we've kind of got this interesting scenario going on where, okay, this was a successful social engineering attack on employees inside of Twitter, and they had access to some of the Twitter tools. This included, you can see we scrolling down to see access to take control of many high visibility accounts and tweet on their behalf. And this is really kind of where we're going to kind of divert a little bit from the conversation. We're going to talk about this tweet here in a little bit, but that they were looking into what other malicious activity could occur. So what did these guys tweet? So now take it for a second and use your imagination here on this. Let's say that you had access. Let's say that you were the hacker and you had done some type of coordinated social engineering attack and had successfully gained access to the entire Twitter platform. And just to put some statistics right there out on that, right, there are currently, as of 2020, 330 million active users on Twitter, with about 145 of those daily on an active basis, right? Some other tweets, right? 40% of Twitter users who saw a tweet on Twitter carried out a purchase after seeing it on Twitter. So 40% of those, 145 million daily active users, that makes it a pretty massive marketing platform. And ultimately, that's what we saw that the hackers were going after, was the vast amount of reach that you could get on this platform. So what exactly did this tweet look like? What they had done was they had access to, and we'll talk about what they had access to here in a little bit, but they basically had access to create tweets of some of the most famous verified accounts. And you can see this by this little check mark right here. If you ever see a check mark like this on Twitter, those are verified accounts. And so what they had done was they had access to all of these verified accounts, and they were posting this tweet. The tweet said, all Bitcoin sent to the address below will be sent back double. If you send 1,000, I'll send you back 2,000, only doing this for the next 30 minutes. And then there's others that, and then they kind of prefaced it and used a COVID-19 related theme on top of this. And so you can see we've got Mike Bloomberg here. You got Kanye West's Twitter account. They did Barack Obama's, they had Joe Biden's, they had Elon Musk, they even had Apple's Twitter account as well. You can see the Bitcoin, you see this address right here. This is the Bitcoin address. We'll get into the Bitcoin piece here in a little bit. Don't stress about that, but we want to kind of focus on taking it in small chunks, right? So you can see that all of these tweets were exactly the same, which meant that this was definitely pre-planned. They had the message planned out already. They knew that they were going to go ahead and conduct this attack. And then the final one that we kind of have here, right, is Jeff Bezos's Twitter account, where again, I've decided to get back to the community. This one was a little bit different, right? All Bitcoin sent to my address will be sent back doubled. I'm only doing a maximum of $50 million. How generous of Jeff Bezos, right? And then of course we see that same Bitcoin address down here. So we, if you're looking for indicators, right? If you're watching this and you're still pretty unfamiliar with social engineering, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. There is no way for this many high profile individuals to make a claim like that across the internet all at the same time without there being a lot of positive buzz for it through mainstream media, as much as people hate about that, or anything else. And so there's lots of avenues to this that kind of indicate for you that this is a phishing tag, right? Number one, it's too good to be true, right? Number two, there's a sense of urgency, right? This is almost always a key indicator of something that's a phishing attack is I'm only doing this for the next 30 minutes. Attackers do that because that's how they try to get you baited in. Was if they give you a limited amount of time, then you have that FOMO, right, or that fear of missing out. And so they use that fear of missing out to try to entice you into acting now and making sure that you can go ahead and execute on it right when they want you to. Also, in this case, they knew that this type of hack would gain a lot of visibility and would probably get them caught pretty quickly. And so this 30 minutes was really, kind of just a traditional smash and grab when it comes to, that type of theft. Was they knew they had to get in, do their message, and try to get as much money as humanly possible before Twitter latched onto this and got it caught down. You can kind of see some of the timestamps on this, right? Is 4:17 p.m. So right before Twitter announced, kind of that they had detected some malicious activity on there. Okay, so now let's talk about this Bitcoin address right here, right? Or actually, let's take a step back. We'll focus on the Bitcoin here in a minute. How exactly were attackers able to post all of these messages to all these Twitter accounts? If you remember when we first looked at the tweets and we started to analyze some of the tweets, it kind of led us to some type of account compromise. Ultimately, when you start to do some of the analysis of what happened on during the hack, there were some tweets that were posted by several of the accounts that showed something like this. Now you'll see some black marks in here. These have got things blacked out to protect the names of the accounts that are shown here. But from what we've been told, allegedly, and what seems to be some of the investigation and some of the tweets that were leaked online, is that what you're looking at is actually a screen here from the inside of Twitter. So if you're a Twitter employee and you're sitting, at work at your computer, wherever it is, I actually think it's at home now because I think Twitter has gone to 100% remote work, and you're administering Twitter. From that perspective, you are looking at the admin console that you would be looking at as part of Twitter. So this is that administrative access to Twitter. And so if this is a Twitter account, you're looking at how many tweets they have. You can have all the kind of control in terms of what type of access they have to their account, any type of tags that they may have about whether it's compromised, it trends on a blacklist, or whether the account's been marked as read-only. You've got identity information from those accounts. So this is an email address from Orange, right, and as well as some information about that account, as well as kind of the ability to change and update the emails or even add emails to it. So this gives a potential Twitter employee complete and total access to your entire Twitter account, which is what you would expect, right? I mean, they're administering the platform, and so they've got to have a way to control their users. Obviously, they're trying to combat a lot of the things that are happening inside of social media these days when it comes to election interference or troll farms or any type of social propaganda and things like that. And so they've got to have access to these consoles to be able to look at users and evaluate them and decide whether they're going to block them or not. So you would absolutely expect this to happen. This shouldn't come as a shocker that this panel exists, but what this does show you is that because we can see images of it now, clearly the attackers had access to internal Twitter systems. And so now really the question becomes is how they got access to those internal Twitter systems. And we'll get to kind of some of the theories around that in just 1 second. The other thing that I want to kind of dive deep into here is Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin could invariably be its own stream altogether. And so our goal here is not to do the life and times of Bitcoin by any stretch of the imagination, but do want to try and have a notional conversation about what Bitcoin is, so that we can have a conversation as to why this worked and how successful this is, and how some of this money will absolutely never be recovered. Okay. So what is Bitcoin? I'm sure you've heard of Bitcoin by now. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, which is really just saying that it uses complex mathematical algorithms to basically define a currency inside of a system. It was actually invented in 2008, so it's really relatively new from a currency perspective. But the problem is that it was invented by an unknown person or group of people. So even the creation of the Bitcoin concept is completely and totally anonymous. But the idea was when this person or this group of people invented Bitcoin, what they had decided was they had thought that the current financial mechanisms that were in place were not reliable. I hate to use the word corrupt, but I know a lot of folks out there that would absolutely call the current financial system corrupt. But it was a way to have a decentralized digital currency, whereby its peer-to-peer network provided it with a way for everybody to have full transparency on what was going on inside of the financial system. And so it had a rocky start. I mean, there's a lot of really good history about how Bitcoin got started. It was quickly adopted by a lot of kind of progressives and as well as just techno nerds who were just interested in using the idea of a decentralized currency concept. A lot of people bought Bitcoin for its just kind of intrinsic value, and you kind of see it kind of take off through the 2010s 2012s until it finally hits a peak in 2018, where it started, really with a really low value, right, of a few $100s or a few hundred pennies, right, per Bitcoin, all the way growing up to January of 2018, where one Bitcoin what was actually worth upwards of about $13,000 per Bitcoin. I think it hit a high of about $19,000 at some point in time, because everybody really thought that they were gonna get rich off all the Bitcoin that they bought in 2008. But here's where it's different, right? Bitcoin is not backed by gold. So if you've ever studied finance, and I am by no means a finance major whatsoever, but when you talk about your dollar bill or your euro or the British pound or whatever the case is, those currencies are backed by gold, allegedly, in banks like the Federal Reserve and all across the world. And so that currency has something that if we ever had to go to task on turning over that money and saying, well, provide proof that you have value for the money that you've got, technically you could get that money in gold. Now there's a lot more complications in it because I think I'd have to recall, but I think it's technically illegal to actually own a bar of gold now. But either way, so the difference is that with Bitcoin, it's actually not backed by any hard currency currently. Its value is purely intrinsic and purely at the whim of the folks who have contributed to the network. And so because of that, the market volatility is just really crazy. And so case in point, right, is in 2017 and 2018, we saw the Bitcoin price really start to skyrocket. But then, kind of around that same time, right, is China, I think around 2018, somewhere around there, or sorry, 2017, right? China first started to ban Bitcoin. And, once that ban was complete in February of 2018, then you actually saw Bitcoin prices fall all the way down to about the 6,000 range in February of 2018. And so then you constantly see Bitcoin's price flux. As a matter of fact, if you, there's a really, really good website out there called Coinbase, right, where you can go and you can actually, monitor and watch the price of Bitcoin. It's almost like going to Market Watch or something like that and watching the market prices go up and down. And so, Bitcoin has become one of those things where it's almost traded on a day trade scenario, just like normal money is. Shortly, kind of around that same time period, right, as Bitcoin was going, you kind of saw the rise of altcoins, or you saw the rise of people who were creating cryptocurrencies to really kind of break away from the normal pack of cryptocurrencies and create lots of deviations. And so that's why when you go to Coinbase, you'll see like Bitcoin, you'll see Ethereum, you'll see Tether, XRP, you'll see all the names of all the various, cryptocurrencies that are out there and their current value. And so you can see that over the last 10 years, right, cryptocurrency has blown up. So what? So what was the appeal of cryptocurrency? Transparency was huge, right? People enjoyed the transparency part of what crypto meant, right? Because of this technology, that they referred to as the blockchain. That meant that every transaction that happened inside of Bitcoin was public knowledge. It had a public ledger of all Bitcoin transactions. So let me kind of show you what that means for a second. So if two people here, it's you and your brother, right, or you and your sister, right, want to make a Bitcoin transaction, right? You want to sell them your PS4, or your Xbox 360, right, whatever it is. When you two decide that you want to conduct a transaction, then the Bitcoin system creates this unique key for your particular transaction, right? So you're gonna pay your brother $200 for his Xbox. There's a unique key that is created for that transaction that says that I'm going to pay, user A is going to pay user B $200. Okay, that transaction is then sent to this peer-to-peer network, right? So all of the computers that exist on the Bitcoin network all hold a copy of that public ledger, and so those computers then all verify that that transaction is legitimate and makes sense, matches some of the requirements that it needs to kind of go through. And once that has been approved, once it's been verified, then a new block is created. And basically it's just a string of information that says that on this date at this time, this Bitcoin address for user A and this Bitcoin address for user B exchanged $200 worth of Bitcoin. This is where the pseudo-anonymous piece of Bitcoin comes into play, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. Once that block has been added to the chain, that chain then gets re-updated across the entire Bitcoin network, and now that public ledger is out there for everybody to see, and then that transaction is then complete. So this entire circle is the circle of a Bitcoin transaction flow. So what, right? There's a lot of people who are typically used to, looking at their financial systems and looking at their credit card statements or bank statements. Well, gosh, it sounds like what you're telling me, Neil, is that every purchase that I make is completely and totally visible to the entire world. Yes and no, right? In this case, right, we're saying user A and user B, but in reality, what it looks like on the blockchain network is that blockchain address that I showed you before, right, from Jeff Bezos' screen, this is what's recorded in the ledger. So this, in this case, was the recipient, right? So this is user B in our example. This is the recipient's blockchain address. So that's user B's blockchain address. User A would be all of the people that ultimately fell for this scam. They have a blockchain address on there as well. And so what we're really recording isn't so much that it's user A and user B, but it's that blockchain address A and blockchain address B. And that's what ultimately gets read to the block. Okay, doesn't sound so bad, but why should I care even so much about having those transactions public? And this is where the creators of Bitcoin and a lot of the cryptocurrencies have really kind of made their stake, right? Is that the current banking system lacks transparency in how financial transactions are made, right? You can't tell who's paying off who. You can't tell where large sums of money are moving to. It's all very cloak and daggery. There's privacy regulations that are in place to prevent, just anybody from saying, well, show me all of Neil's bank transactions, right? You have to get a court order, you have to have reasons for it and things like that. And so this provides a level of transparency so that if you wanted to see if a politician was corrupt, then, all of their transactions would be completely viewable. If you wanted to track, a drug lord laundering money, all of their transactions would be visible. And so that's a lot of the basis behind why folks got into or really cling on to the idea of Bitcoin, is that amount of transparency and the decentralization, of the marketplaces. So we kind of talked about the pseudo-anonymous piece of this. So let's talk about the pseudo-anonymous, right? And this will really kind of talk about some of the other aspects of Bitcoin that we want to cover. So this Bitcoin address, right? It's hard to look at this Bitcoin address and know who this Bitcoin address is associated with. That's a pseudo-anonymous piece. There is no record specifically, explicitly, of this Bitcoin address being tied specifically to a person or individual. What happens though is that because all of the transactions on the ledger are completely and totally public, you can track that Bitcoin address throughout its entire life. And so if you are able, in the case of this type of attack, if you were able to ultimately find where a criminal had made a mistake and had associated with this Bitcoin address with his real ID, you would then have a history of his entire transactions. And so let's say that you steal all this money. Let's say that you stole some money with this Bitcoin address. At some point in time, you've got to get that Bitcoin out of the system. You've got to turn it into real cash. At that point in time in which you turn it into real cash, that's where a lot of law enforcement really, kind of debunks that myth that blockchain is completely and totally anonymous. Now, this is very high level. So there's lots of episodes that we could do where we dive into, mixing and anonymizing Bitcoin and changing them in between different currency types to try to evade law enforcement. But once you're down that road, right, you're not talking about anything different than traditional, typical, anti-money laundering type techniques where you're washing money and spreading out across. But you can see how the pseudo-anonymous characteristics here of Bitcoin, are somewhat appealing to cyber criminals because it's widely used, it's widely accepted, it's a standard way of taking cryptocurrency, and kind of remaining pseudo-anonymous in your transactions. So I want to show you what that pseudo anonymity looks like. Okay, so this is a Bitcoin address. There are companies out there all the time that are doing blockchain analysis. Now, that's just a really fancy way of saying that they take a Bitcoin address like this and they're able to follow all of the transactions associated with that Bitcoin address. And so there's a really good website out there called blockchain.com. And so you can put in any Bitcoin address that you want to, and it will show you all of the transactions that have ever been associated with that Bitcoin address. And so here we have, again, this Bitcoin address right here, 0WLLH, right? 0WLH, right here. This Bitcoin address. So this is the Bitcoin address that was posted to all these Twitter accounts. And you can see that there were 394 transactions that were done to this blockchain address. So as of today, so this was refreshed this morning. So current Bitcoin price is 91.2544. And they totally received about 12.869. So let's do 12.869 Bitcoin multiplied by the current price of Bitcoin, which is 91.25. 91.25. So in 2 hours worth of work, these cyber criminals ran away with $117,000 in Bitcoin. 2 hours worth of work. That's not too shabby, is it? You can also see, right? So now we can see that the current balance is this much. So how much Bitcoin is that? So our current Bitcoin price, right, was 91.25, right? Currently sitting inside of that Bitcoin address is 0.0089, $81. So as of today, they have moved all $117,000 of that completely out of that Bitcoin address, and it is off to other Bitcoin addresses. And there's people out there right now, as a result of this hack that are, I can guarantee you, that are out there analyzing all of the addresses that all of this Bitcoin went to so that they could try to identify the cyber criminal. But that right there is the transparency that you get with Bitcoin, and so it allows for a massive amount of analysis. And so now it's that traditional cat and mouse game, right? It's you've got an attacker who now has gotten away with $117,000, and now there are people out there who are trying to find out ultimately who was the recipient of that $117,000. The other thing that I should mention, kind of the way that they created the Bitcoin transaction flow, right, is that once a transaction happens, that's it. There's no undoing it. Right? Once it's committed to the block, you can't go back and say, well, that was fraud. We want that block to be removed. That's not how the blockchain was built. All transactions are final in the way Bitcoin was designed. And so this $117,000, once it's been removed from these accounts, is completely gone. And so you can see here, based on these transactions, you can see, the hash. This is that verification of the transaction, and you can see, how much Bitcoin was moved from space to space. So Bitcoin address, right? You can see movement of Bitcoin all the way down, right? So that's kind of the power of seeing that transaction. I can tell you, we talk a little bit about the pseudo-anonymous capabilities when it comes to Bitcoin. Even the FBI, right, through a lot of their leaked documentations, they have gotten very, very good at tracking Bitcoin. But it's not just the FBI. If anybody who's watching, from the stateside, right, has done their taxes, right, July 15th was tax day last week. You should have seen a question on your taxes that actually asked you if you had bought, sold, or traded in digital currency. The IRS is also looking very hard at digital currency. We can get into an entire conversation about whether whether the financial systems are acknowledging that blockchain or that Bitcoin or Monero or anything like that is actually a legitimate currency or not. I think that's a fun debate. If anybody wants to come on and kind of talk about that, then let me know. We'll bring you onto the show and we'll have a good solid debate about that. But the fact that IRS is looking at it, the FBI is showing how easy it is to track Bitcoin. It's losing kind of its thin veneer of civility of being, completely totally anonymous. It doesn't change the fact that cyber criminals are using it on the regular, and I don't think we'll see that change anytime in the future just because of its adoption. But you can definitely see that the FBI has definitely indicated how easy it is to track folks with Bitcoin. However, they will also admit, through these leaked documents, that they do have an untraceable coin that they're frustrated with. So this is where, Bitcoin and blockchain has really kind of set the standard and really kind of pushed innovation when it comes to cryptocurrencies through the roof, because through Bitcoin, through what they've done with Bitcoin, they've been able to kind of accelerate the use or the creation of other cryptocurrencies, also known as altcoins. That's why we have multiple of these that are being traded here on the market, right, that you can see right here. And so the FBI has definitely admitted that, it's increasingly harder for them to track Monero, right? There you go. Sorry, highlight the right one, right? Untraceable, at least for now, is Monero. And so, while Bitcoin may be relatively accepted generally, Monero is pretty much untraceable, at least for now, by criminal or law enforcement organizations like the FBI. And so if you're a cyber criminal, you're obviously looking for, ways to launder that money. You're looking at cryptocurrencies like this to be able to offload that 117,000 so that you can at least take ownership of some of that and start to spend it. Now, that's not, I don't mean to say that that's the entire premise behind cryptocurrency, right, is the use of illegal stuff. As a matter of fact, Monero being private was not created for illegal purposes, right? The privacy behind Bitcoin was because the folks really truly wanted to have a cryptocurrency that not only provided you with fidelity and an open ledger of transactions that happened, but also completely totally anonymous, that whoever user A was behind that cryptocurrency address, you could never tie that back to a real person, because they also believe that your financial transactions should be private to an extent. Bitcoin gets a lot of adoption in countries like Venezuela and Argentina. As a matter of fact, I was on a phone call with a very brilliant engineer down in Argentina, whose economy is collapsing around them, right, and whatnot. And so they very much are huge into cryptocurrencies and investing in cryptocurrencies, because that way it's at least backed by some form of system and at least a little bit more resilient to inflation and some of the collapsing economies that are out there. They could ultimately end up taking $1,000 in Monero, right, and going to another country if they ever had to flee that country, and still have a relative equal amount of that currency, versus if you had $1,000 in Argentinian dollars, by the time you went to go leave that country, it may be worth $10. And so it's we talk about it being used for malicious activity, but there's the entire premise behind blockchain, the entire premise behind cryptocurrency was definitely there for supporting alternative ways of doing currency. So, excuse me. With that being said, now we've kind of talked about Bitcoin. Let's kind of get to some of the hows or whys this type of attack could happen inside of Twitter. Again, lots of good information out there. There's lots of good reads. As a matter of fact, Brian Krebs, if you're not familiar with him, wrote up a really good article in terms of trying to outline the investigation that he's been able to do in terms of this type of attack. And I would definitely encourage you that if you're looking for a fantastic investigative journalist, definitely subscribe to Krebs on Security if you're not already. But if you're not, or if you've already read it, one of the things that he highlights inside of his article, right, is this idea of SIM swapping. SIM swapping is not new. As a matter of fact, there has been, quite a lot of, SIM swapping type of attacks that have happened in the past. As a matter of fact, last year, Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter, had his Twitter account, actually hacked via the method of SIM swapping. And so when we talk about SIM swapping, there's kind of a complicated flow to this, right? Where you've got you and your mobile device here, right? And so once you're targeted by an attacker, they have to gather some personally identifiable information about you. Typically, they really just need to know what your phone number is, and quite honestly, that's honestly not that hard to do. There's quite a bit of information out there about how attackers gain access to your phone number. We'll kind of hit on that here in a little bit. But once they gain access to your phone number, they can simply then call up, and again, through that use of social engineering, they'll call up your cell phone provider. So in this case, in this example, we're talking about AT&T as your cell phone provider. They call you, you call up the telephone provider, tell them that you've got a new phone, you've got a new SIM card, you need them to transfer that number over to the new SIM card. That then happens, and from there, your new SIM card that's in the attacker's device actually is now registered to your telephone number. They then use that to try to log into any of your accounts, whether it's your email account, whether it's Jack Dorsey's Twitter account, or whatever the case is. And when that SMS verification code for that multi-factor authentication gets sent to the phone, it gets sent to the attacker's phone, versus your own. Well, hold on, Neil. I thought you told me that multi-factor authentication was secure. Well, multi-factor authentication is secure, right? Multi-factor authentication is the best way to protect your accounts, and I stand by that 100%. There are different ways of implementing multi-factor authentication, and that's oftentimes what we talk about in the cybersecurity space as to where things can go right or where things can go wrong. Multi-factor authentication is the best way to secure any of your accounts. The method in which multi-factor authentication is implemented is the problem. This method, whereby they send you a text message with your security code, has been debunked for at least a couple years now because of this SIM swapping technique that's been proven out. The best way to do multi-factor authentication is if you have like the Google app or the Microsoft app or even Duo Security, right, whereby you get that randomized number on your phone that you then use to plug into your multi-factor authentication box. That's the best way to do multi-factor authentication. SMS has been proven to be broken for years, but that's been used on, that's what we refer to as a SIM swapping type of attack. And so what was discovered as part of this is that on one of the hacker forums, that's out there, there's a hacker forum called OG Users, which is dedicated to account hijacking of Twitter type of accounts. There's actually a user on that forum called Chawan, who for $250, and this was taken shortly after the Twitter hack, as people were going out there and researching the forums, for $250, they would get you access to any Twitter account that you wanted to. And again, if you saw our episode on darknet markets and things like that, you'll kind of see that this is very common to what some of the forums and whatnot look like out there, right? They've got different reputation, how many people vouch for them. He's got this is the mention of an escrow. We can get into dissecting this all we wanted to, right? But you can see that he's advertising $250 for any Twitter account that's out there, right? So what this tells us is that this user already has access to some mechanism inside of Twitter with which to then turn around and sell access to any Twitter account he wants, right? So this is kind of one of those leading indicators that an account inside of Twitter has been compromised. So then how does that happen? Well, we go back to social engineering, right? There's kind of two running theories, and we'll talk about both running theories here in a little bit as to how this potentially could have happened. The first one, the easy one to talk about, right, is some type of social engineering. Somebody socially engineered an administrator inside of Twitter, convinced them to give up their credentials and then they use those credentials to then gain access to the Twitter console that we showed you, screenshots of earlier in the stream. That's hard to digest, right? Because Twitter's a huge tech company. They protect, 330 million registered users on a platform, 140 million users that are using it on a daily basis. They should, of all companies, really be trying to be the leader of the pack when it comes to our protection of our data. Whether that is or is not the case, we probably will never know. In this case, whether they did have multi-factor authentication or not enabled on this account, and that's what makes these hacks difficult, is because we have to do a little bit of guessing. But that's the easy answer to kind of run to, is that somebody socially engineered an admin of Twitter, who then the attackers used to gain access to the Twitter console. In some of the more nefarious cases that we've seen, so this is a case of T-Mobile. So this is an article that Vice had done a number of years ago. As a matter of fact, I think it was like a year ago that they had done this one. Yeah, this one was done, right at about a year ago. So 2 years ago, sorry, 2018. So yeah, wow, look at that, almost 2 years to the day, right? Vice had done an article on SIM hijackers, and if anybody wants to, let me know. I can put the article link to this inside. Actually, I'll go ahead and put this article link inside of chat so people can read it. So again, SIM swapping, not a new technique. Something that's definitely been out there for a number of years. And so, but if you go down here, if we scroll back to where we were just a second ago, one of the key parts about this article, right? Here it is, right down here, right? We talk about social engineering being the primary way in which potentially could have gained access to the console. In this case, you can see that in this particular article, they had indicated that they were able to bribe internal T-Mobile users with only like $80 or $100 to perform the SIM swap on their target. So this is what we refer to as insider threat. Okay. And that's kind of the other running theory as to how this potentially could have happened inside of Twitter, especially in a day and age where we have COVID going on. I don't know about anybody else who's watching LinkedIn or Twitter, but there are hundreds, it's sad, there's hundreds of posts on an almost daily basis of people who are getting laid off or out of work as a result of COVID. As a matter of fact, I was just on a phone call with an individual Friday afternoon who was recently out of work because of COVID. And so there's a lot of incentive whenever those types of global issues happen, whereby you can absolutely convince somebody to take a few $100s, take a couple $100 to provide you access. And so that insider threat, that malicious insider, so in this case T-Mobile, but what if what happened on Wednesday of last week, what if that was insider threat? What if somebody had bribed a Twitter employee to give access to some attackers? Now, whether that's direct access to the console, or whether that Twitter employee used his access to spread that message. Again, that may be something we may or may not ever know of, but it's entirely possible that it could have been an insider to Twitter that ultimately led to the compromise of all of these accounts. You can see here, right here, that so Thug and Ace that they keep mentioning here were hackers of this particular T-Mobile SIM swapping type scam that had been there. And of course, T-Mobile declines to answer those types of questions, and you can't really expect that Twitter is going to answer that type of question either. But it definitely leads itself to an alternative possibility as to how this potentially could have happened inside of that large organization. In this case, I wanted to kind of show this screenshot as well. This is a case whereby, in the case of the T-Mobile ones, these guys had direct access. So this was done over a Skype chat for Vice during this interview. In this case, you can see that this is publicly available, accessible website for T-Mobile. Whereby in this case, these particular hackers actually had direct access to the T-Mobile console that the technicians would use, and inside of that console, you could simply put in telephone numbers, and you can access all of the information for the account: last four social, right, tax ID, SIM, all this information here, and that helps facilitate that access. If you're looking at it from a mobile endpoint perspective. So that's SIM swapping. So that's we talk about that. That's one of the theories. That seems to be a lot of the evidence that's pointing to how this entire thing potentially went down. One of the things that I kind of want to focus on with this as well is tech companies, we rely on tech companies to protect our data. And so it is a huge responsibility of tech companies, especially in a company like Twitter, for us to talk about any potential impacts that something like this could happen. Now, in this case, these attackers were, I can tell you right now, these attackers were incredibly low level. If you talk to folks out there, the fact that they took $100,000 is chump change. They had access to the most powerful Twitter accounts in the entire world. They had, the access to, the current president's Twitter account. They had access to the past president's Twitter account. They had access to Elon Musk's Twitter account. If you've ever followed Tesla stock, right, there's things that they could have done, in that realm as well. And so, you could tell just the sophistication level of these individuals based solely on, what their motivation was. Snatch and grab $100,000 of Bitcoin and get out as quick as possible. I'm sure that they had it in their mind that they would get more than that. I think we're all surprised that they got what they did get. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much. Think about what this could have been, right? Think about some of the things that have happened on Twitter here lately, what controversies we've seen surrounding Twitter. The scrutiny that companies like Facebook and Twitter and other social media platforms are under on a day-to-day basis. And think about, the art of the possible is one of the terms that I like to use about what could have happened on Facebook. Could they have started a war? Could they have manipulated the stock markets? Could they have made a nefarious tweet on something like Tesla stock or Google stock or Apple stock that could have cost those companies, hundreds, billions, trillions of dollars? What if they did get data out of direct messages? Think about, Twitter also has a direct messaging capability, right? How many direct messages are going on between organizations that are out there? Do we know if they've been harvesting direct messages between, folks on the Twitter platform? Those are things that we don't know yet at all. And so there's a lot of what ifs that are still kind of outstanding for what this hack could have meant, that I don't think we will ever know what the full potential is. But I think it does kind of bring a new light into what are companies like this doing from a security perspective to secure some of these very, very large access points that could potentially drive financial markets, social influence, or anything else out there. And so with that, we will tie off the hacking of Twitter. Hopefully that helped kind of demystify some of what was happening with Twitter, kind of how it pans out, what it means to you, things from that perspective. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic. So a couple days ago, the FBI issued a warning. Cyber criminals are spoofing airport websites and Wi-Fi. Not new news, but I did see it as an opportunity for us to kind of talk about, what that means or what it could mean for you, especially in this day and age of COVID, right? If you're out traveling, if you're, there's not many people that are traveling now as compared to it was before, but there's still a good number of people that are out there traveling, and they're constantly trying to, make sure that they have up to the minute access to data and to information, especially during their travels. If you've ever been to any airport, right, there's, as soon as you sit down and pull up your Wi-Fi menu, there's probably several hundred hotspots for you to pick as soon as you get to that airport. That's absolutely not uncommon. It's also not uncommon for us to see spoofing of websites. That, as a matter of fact, I've worked for several incident response teams in the past where spoofing of websites and having to contend with those spoofing of the websites becomes very, very painful from an incident response perspective, and having to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. The FBI in this case is issuing a statement saying that we're going to potentially see an increase of that, especially as it relates to targeting folks who are using the airport, going to airport websites to try to figure out flight statuses, trying to figure out if what the restrictions are to be able to take a flight anywhere, or even where some of the countries may be doing travel restrictions based on the entire COVID scenario. And again, this gets back to something I said a couple streams ago, where attackers will always go after, kind of what's in the news and what's current and things like that. And so this is just another case of where they're using COVID as a way to try to attack travelers and try to gain access to travel information. And so we'll paste this article in chat if folks want to kind of peruse this article. But one of the things that I want to cover for everybody is I want to kind of talk about domain spoofing really quick. And this is going to be a super easy explanation, super easy conversation, right, when it comes to domain spoofing. Real easy picture here, right? On the left-hand side, right, we have a perfectly normal good domain, it-explained.com. For the sake of this demonstration, right, this is the legitimate website. This is for a company called IT Explained. You put in your keyword here, and it explains an IT term here for you here as well. This is an example of a malicious website. Now it will look, we've blurred everything out to just kind of not distract you from the elements here, but it will look exactly like the real domain. But you can see up here in the URL bar, it's it-explained.com. Or is it? Look at this right here. The I and the A. You can see, hopefully that's showing up on stream really well, right? You can see here as well. AI, IA. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the easiest case of domain spoofing that you can see, right? It happens all the time. Cyber criminals are out there all the time looking at domains, especially popular domains of your company, domains of where you work at, and looking for ways to try to trick you into thinking that this domain that you think you're going to is actually not a domain. And so what will happen is they'll put a domain like this up, and then they'll put a page here that says, to access this page, you must log into your Google account, or to access this page, you must log into your corporate account. And so they'll present you with an Office 365, or they'll present you with a Google login. And then you'll put in your credentials, and then you'll be rerouted to the page that you ultimately thought you were going to in the first place. And now a cyber criminal has taken your credentials. And so, in the idea of social engineering that we've been talking about all day, and in some of the techniques that attackers use for social engineering, this is definitely one of the most prevalent ones, especially when we see them targeting users at airports and things like this, or even corporate networks and corporate environments and whatnot. And so, we can see that, when we look at things from a trending and a statistics perspective, there's lots of organizations out there that monitor and do trend analysis for domain registration. In this case, if you paid attention to our stream last Wednesday, we mentioned Checkpoint and kind of their research organization at Checkpoint being very good. This is another Checkpoint research statistic where they've monitored the domain registrations of Zoom domains over the course of the, since January 1st until kind of the start of COVID. And so you can kind of see, a relatively normal flow of, Zoom, domains that have been registered. And then bam, as soon as COVID hits, a huge giant spike and increase. These dips that you see, you can see these dips right here. These are where hackers will attempt to do domain registrations, and then they'll kind of ease off their attacks. Then they'll come in and do domain registrations, and then they'll ease off their attacks. And so that's why you see these spikes and these dips. But this, you will always see this whenever there's a hurricane, whenever there's an earthquake, whenever there's a natural disaster. In a case like a pandemic like we're under right now, you will always see domain registrations spike during that time period as hackers leverage those domains for their phishing campaigns. And so, kind of the takeaway here, right, and the advice that we want to give to people is when you're out in public and you're using public Wi-Fi, whether you're at an airport, whether you're at a hotel, whether you're at Starbucks, whatever the case is, be extra diligent in how you're utilizing those Wi-Fis. If you're a Twitter employee, please don't use, please don't access the admin console of Twitter while you're, on a public Wi-Fi at Starbucks or something like that without checking the stuff. But, look at the domains of the sites that you're accessing. If you start to see weird warnings or weird pop-ups happen on your screen, right, then something could definitely be off, and we would definitely ask you to question that. But always pay attention to the sites that you're going to. Don't just rely solely on the technology to guarantee that you have access to the right sites. Because as you can tell, cyber criminals, continue to try to target us. It's always more sinister whenever the FBI issues a warning, because that means that they're seeing an increased, a number of it, that they're being called into and asked to investigate. So. with that, I promised you guys that we would try to take breaks, at the end of our section. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a quick 3-minute break to get some water and stretch our legs a little bit. I'll be back in about 2 minutes. All right, everybody, welcome back. All right, as we move into our next and final section for the day, want to do something a little different and kind of explain why I'm doing it. So as we move into our next section, I've mentioned before about the vast number of resources that are available out there to you when it comes to learning and getting into cybersecurity. We talk about, kind of, if you go back to my video several weeks ago, right, we talked about the 4 things that you can do to get started in cybersecurity. And one of those things was going out there and doing a lot of self-learning. I love to answer questions. I love to interact with folks, and I love to really talk about, their experiences, what they're doing, how they're getting involved in cybersecurity, and I really love to share my journey with them and help them kind of find their own way, and kind of give them pointers and breadcrumbs and things like that to do. I love to do panels. If I've done hundreds of panels throughout my entire career. It's one of the most fun types of speaking engagements that I can do. You'll almost always catch me if you're offering an opportunity to sit on a panel. I'll almost always take an opportunity to sit on a panel. I absolutely love it. One of the reasons for that is because I love to get asked questions and I love to answer them. And so today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to actually go over to Reddit, which is a pretty popular platform for us in information security. And we're going to go on to one of the subreddits that are out there, we're going to go on to our NetSec students, which is a subreddit for folks who are, currently studying network security or its related subjects. And if you're familiar with our NetSec, which is one of the more popular subreddits where they've got a lot of kind of the current articles and current states of cybersecurity, then our NetSec students would be where folks go to really ask questions and try to figure out where they are in their career. And so what we're going to do is we're going to answer some Reddit posts. We're going to answer them virtually here on stream. We'll then take those answers, and hopefully they answer some questions for folks that are here. But I saw some questions when perusing Reddit the other day that I thought would be fantastic questions to answer on stream, and so I wanted to be able to provide that information for folks who'd be listening here. And so, without further ado, let's kind of jump on over and take a look at that. So as mentioned, so this is Reddit, right? We talk about our NetSec students. There are several subreddits, and we could go on an entire kind of binge on all the different types of subreddits that are out there, and we could do this on multiple ones. But I thought our NetSec students, the guys over there who are asking questions, the guys and girls and folks over there who are asking questions, are asking fantastic, really great questions. And so I kind of wanted to take this opportunity to kind of run through Reddit and talk about a couple of things that I saw. So the first and foremost here, posted by InfoSec Noob 123 about 3 days ago now. He's in his early 30s. He or she's in his early 30s. They're in the military. I'm thinking about getting out. I've been forced to think seriously about what I'm going to do when I grow up. That's good. It's a good thing. Doesn't have a technical background, but in his military job, he's done a lot of work on red teaming, risk assessments, as well as a lot of administrative side of information physical security. I find stuff like this fascinating. So he happens to be, so this link right here happens to link to a SIM swapping article here. So he finds SIM swapping fascinating. I've taken a few classes in data science type topics, but when I've talked to people working in the field about what I'm most interested in, they suggested that what I was really interested in was information security, network security. So my question is, what's the distinction between network security and the broader field of information security? Let's start with that question first. Network security is a subset of information security. Information security is what we refer to in the corporate world of the ability to safeguard the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of a corporation's data or their secrets, through their day-to-day business. If you think about any company, they have some form of intellectual property. That's why they're profitable, right? Whether it's, if you work for, a food company, it may be a recipe for something. If you're working for a tech company, it may be, some type of digital intellectual property. Apple, it may be, the specs to the new iPhone, or anything of that case. If you're a medical company, right, it could be patient records, personally identifiable information. It could be, if you're working for a manufacturer or device developer, it could be some type of intellectual property that gives you a competitive advantage. Excuse me. And so every company has data in which that they find valuable that they need to protect. And so information security is a term for what the entirety of a cybersecurity organization does inside of that company. So if you think about, you got a CEO that then typically has like a CFO underneath it, and then there's usually like a CISO or Chief Information Security Officer that then reports into that structure. That Chief Information Security Officer is in charge of that data protection layer or that information security layer inside of that organization. Typically, and I've mentioned this in a few other streams, right? They've got, a risk and governance, tower that reports to them. They've got a privacy tower that reports to them. They've usually got a security engineering team, a security architecture team, and a security operations team. And then inside of those teams, you've got various skill sets and whatnot. And so NetSec or network security typically falls within inside of either that security operations team or that security engineering team, depending on whether you're doing design and build or whether you're doing some type of implementation or operational type perspective. And so I would definitely, the distinction there is really the difference between a very very direct skill in network security versus the broader function of an entire cybersecurity organization that does information security. When you think about that, from that perspective, you really only, this gets back to my analogy that I made a few streams ago, right? Which is, you're on a lake that's a mile wide and a mile deep. That entire lake would be the same as the entire information security and entire cybersecurity field. And, NetSec is only one very, very specific part of that lake. What's the way into the field for someone without a technical background? I have said this numerous times before. I will continue to harp on it. Your background does not matter when it comes to getting into cybersecurity. Whether you have a technical background or not, doesn't matter. I'll give you an example. One of the first pen testers when I got out of the military that I had the privilege of working with, his name's Trenton Ivey. He's now over at SecureWorks, in charge of their OffSec, kind of over there at SecureWorks. Brilliant individual. He's an amazing pen tester. He started out going for a PhD in in biology of all things, right? So he started out very much in a non-technical career field, and then realized that even though he had loved computers, his whole life, that wasn't the career path for him, and so he upped and made a change to something that was more in line with where his passion was and what he enjoyed. Your background doesn't determine where you go in the future, if you don't let it to. And so I think that there's opportunities for anybody getting into this career field, whether you have a technical background or whether you don't have a technical background, to do something. Information security being as broad as it is, the technical side of it, the security operations, the security architecture, the security engineering piece of it is only one part of cybersecurity. As a career, there are other parts of cybersecurity as a career, or information security, whereby you have, like I mentioned before, risk and governance, whereby you're doing your risk assessments. You mentioned in your post that you've done a lot of work in red teaming and risk assessments, especially around information and physical security. If you've done risk assessments, you have a perfect place inside of a risk and governance organization whereby you can do those risk assessments for an entire enterprise, an entire corporation, and help them to assess their risk. So that they know which types of controls are the best types of controls to implement and to put inside of those systems. Similarly, there's policy development, there's privacy. Privacy is huge now. If you've done any privacy work, or if you're a former privacy lawyer, or if you've formerly done any type of data integrity work and things like that, privacy's got a huge space, inside of information security organizations, especially with the advent of the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, as well as the GDPR, which is the data protection program that the EU has established. And so privacy organizations, inside of information security organizations, are a huge place for you to go. So there's absolutely tons of places for you to go if you don't have a technical background. But what I would also encourage you is that if the technical side interests you, getting into the non-technical side is a great way to get your foot in the door on a cybersecurity organization, and then continue to learn and continue to train on the technical side, and eventually make that jump over to the technical side of doing things. There's lots of advantage to having a conversation about, having more, you call it non-technical folks inside of a cybersecurity team. I've said this before on stream before, right? Everybody loves the hacking stuff. Everybody thinks the hacking stuff is the coolest thing in the world. When in the reality is that is such an infinitely small part of what it is that we do inside of cybersecurity. And so the need for non-technical folks to put their expertise to work inside the risk and governance, inside the privacy realms, and things like that is massive. We need that. And on top of that, if you have a technical background and this type of stuff interests you, there's a huge need for that inside of cybersecurity. And I would say that you don't always have to get pigeonholed into a technical background. He goes on to say, I of course wanted to study on my own. That's good. I know there's abundance of online resources for becoming more technically proficient. That's correct. The fact that you are willing to admit that you're willing to study on your own is huge. I've said it before in previous streams. I'll continue to harp on it, right? As well as that, you have to be willing to do self learning. Not that I think that we in cybersecurity, won't teach people how to come into this field, but there is so much data out there that the advice that we could give you would be, very, very, um, uh, you know, very minute compared to the amount of self-study that you could do that's out there, right? You'd learn much faster just by going out there and learning on your own than sitting here and asking questions and us having an 8-hour conversation back and forth on going out there. It's much easier for you to find parts that interest you and then come with very specific questions about those parts that interest you. Those are oftentimes where we can say, okay, now I can see where your head's at, what you're interested in. How do we dive deep into that? It is a rabbit hole and it does go deep. Okay. I've said this before. If you go back and listen to some of my other streams, right? You have to pull on that thread and you have to keep pulling on that thread until you take that rabbit hole as far as you think you want to go. Right. Having these tabs open for all this stuff, this is not uncommon. I mean, if you looked at any cybersecurity folks, I'm sure that they're in the same way. As a matter of fact, prepping for this stream, right? You may only see 4 tabs up here right now that I've got on the screen, but I've got like 5 different, so I've got 5 different browsers that are going on down here at the bottom as I kind of prep for the stream and kind of, make this information available for folks that are out there. So I think I wouldn't stress too much about having, 100 tabs open. Those are all things that that you're interested in. If you look at my bookmarks, if I were to show my bookmarks, hundreds and hundreds of bookmarks. On the iPhone, you can, open pages and new tabs, and you just let them sit there. And on the iPhone, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages on my iPhone of pages that I need to read or need to research or need to demo products and things like that. So, that is all part of the learning process. And what I can say is that if you're doing that, you're completely and totally normal. And I think you're doing exactly what it is that you need to be doing in this space. Outside of that, I've given you some pretty good career advice here in terms of where to start. Go back and look at my other video, but I did a video on top 4 things that you can do today to get started into cybersecurity. It sounds like you've done several of them already, and so you may only need to do maybe the last 2 parts. Of that, and I'd be more than willing to kind of help you kind of figure out what those next parts are. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter or any of the other socials, I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. What are some good resources for somebody interested in blue team? I would like to work as a blue teamer in security, and I'm struggling to determine what are some good resources for developing the necessary skills to be a security analyst engineer. So I'm gonna take your question in a little bit of a different way, right? And let everybody know, right? This is a rarity. This is a unicorn, right? Somebody who is interested in blue team. So when we talk about red team and blue team, right, we're talking about the difference between folks who focus solely on offensive skill sets and folks who focus solely on defensive skill sets and protecting organizations. You literally just heard me say it maybe 5 or 10 minutes ago, right? That everybody wants to be a red teamer. Everybody wants to do pen testing, and in reality, that is not. That's such a very, very small part of what it is that we do. Blue teaming, protecting an organization, that happens every day. I've led several incident response organizations, several security operations organizations, and the folks who are on the front lines every day are the blue teamers. Those are the folks who are, looking at security alerts. Those are folks who are identifying threats in an organization. Those are the folks who are hunting for threats inside of an organization, actively hunting. And so if you're competitive at all, or if you like the military at all, being a blue teamer is the equivalent of being the modern day fighter pilot. Like if you want to talk about the ultimate nerd analogy, right? Today's blue teamers were the 1980s Top Gunners. Right. So imagine yourself as Maverick or Goose sitting in front of that keyboard, fighting, those MiGs right in the air. That's what today's blue teamers are, is they are on the front lines, actively engaged in cyber air-to-air combat on the regular, in any organization. And so to see somebody, to see this user step right out and say they're interested in blue team and they want to proceed blue team, my hat is off to you, sir. I'm glad to have you on the battle space, and welcome to it. Now, in terms of good resources for somebody interested in blue team. First thing is, there is a list down here for the threat hunting community. Definitely, anytime you see folks linking Discord, I would absolutely encourage anybody and everybody to join as many Discords as possible. You can get kind of overwhelmed. Again, it gets kind of an information overload where there's tons of information that's out there, but I would definitely recommend doing Discords. Unfortunately, that's kind of where it looks like some of the advice here is added. So, in addition to kind of giving this feedback over the video, I'll also reply to this post and give you some information as well. I would equate yourself with blue team technology. You'll see the Splunk banner, kind of over my shoulder here. Splunk is a fantastic, technology that is, they do have a free and open source version of the technology that you can download and start to use. So this gets back to, Fockets is in there. Blue team is where the money is. 100% true. 100% true. Blue team is exactly where the money is. But you can go and you can download Splunk for free. It's got a free license of it, and then you can go out there and you can start to pull in logs from your home computer. You can go out there and start to stand up a web server. One of the fun experiments to do, right, is to go out to DigitalOcean, stand you up a web server, turn SSH on, open to the internet, and then take all of those logs that are going to come into that server in DigitalOcean, put those into your Splunk instance, and just start watching what it's like to have your SSH server get pounded with brute force SSH requests literally every second of every day. And just that's it. That's two pieces of equipment, two easy things that are easy for you to do. You can do it with relatively little, investment out there, and you can then start having a system that's getting attacked on the internet on a day-to-day basis and having logs going into a system like Splunk. And then you can start to see what it's like to have to look at attacks in real time. There's books out there. If you're looking for books, if you're a book type reader, No Starch Press has got a lot of, they're kind of my go-to publication organization when it comes to looking for books, whether it's red team or blue team centric. They've got several books that are out there that talk about intelligence driven incident response. They've got books out there that talk about doing data analytics and other type of blue team activities. If you're that type of reader as well, it can kind of go either way with books sometimes, but I think No Starch Press has got a good amount of publications out there. If you're into ebooks, some No Starch Press books are available on ebooks, most are not. So definitely don't be don't be surprised if you see an overwhelming amount of books out there on Amazon or on any of the ebooks out there. When it comes to CTFs, Google does an annual CTF that is somewhat red team focused, but they do have some blue team elements on it. Anytime you see a CTF that's offering forensics as part of the CTF, those are obviously good CTFs for you to participate in. If you're part of an organization that does have Splunk, or if you know some friends of organizations that are using Splunk that can get you in, Boss of the SOC, shameless plug for Splunk and Boss of the SOC. And I see Fockets is in chat, and he just got done completing Boss of the SOC as well. And as well as I was chatting with some folks on the RNetSec students Discord channel about their experience in Boss of the SOC as well. But if you can get into Boss of the SOC is absolutely a fantastic, blue team type of CTF that you can do. You can go in there with zero level of experience, and they'll walk you through and they'll help you get everything from the basics of trying to do any type of investigation all the way up to some advanced threat hunting. And so Boss of the SOC is a fantastic CTF for you to get involved in. It's put on by Splunk every year. With how DEF CON and Black Hat are going virtual this year, you could probably benefit from having some, I think even Black Hat reduced their entry fee. Don't quote me on that, but I think Black Hat reduced their entry fee. I think DEF CON is doing a ton of virtual villages. I know the virtual red team village and the virtual blue team village are starting to get underway. Car Hacking Village is also going to be virtual, and so I definitely would look, especially this year, where that travel costs and entry costs are probably going to get reduced for a lot of those type of activities. I would definitely look at getting into Blue Team Village and trying to get access to some of the content that Blue Team Village is going to put out. But outside of that, there's lots of different hands-on things that you could do, to be interested in Blue Team. And I would highly recommend that you focus very, very hard on the hands-on piece of blue teaming instead of going out there and reading a lot of resources. That's I think that's one of those areas where you could benefit a ton from having hands-on resources. Okay. Move on to one of the last tabs. So this one's posted a day ago as well. Undergraduate to career advice. So this is somebody who's completed their undergraduate, looking to get out into the career. This is kind of a long post. Let's see what we've got here for this one. Waiting for commencement undergraduate, 4-year degree in information security. During this 4 years, I will have an opportunity to work full-time 5 days a week for 1 year, 4 months as part of a work-study program. Take professional certification part of the module. Right now, I'm in the process of completing eLearn Securities, EJPT. I'm also going to proceed with ECCP by eLearn Security during one of the semester breaks. I'm currently 24 years old and will most probably graduate at 27, 28 years old with 1 month IT-related experience. I'm looking to get into offensive security like pen testing, red teaming for maybe about 1 to 3 years after graduation before pivoting into security management level when I'm about 31 years old. My 2 questions are, during the professional certification module, should I attempt OSCP given that I will hopefully have EJPT and ECTPT or CISSP? Should I avoid OSCP since it's just a enumerate, try harder CTF focused cert, which may not reflect a real life pen test? All right, so let's do this one first. Let's talk about certifications. So, you're doing the eLearn security certifications, which I think are fantastic. Good job. I think, if you go back to the video that I posted on the 4 things that you can do to get into cybersecurity, it sounds like you know what it is you want, and you've pulled on that thread. You've decided that you want to get into offensive security like pen testing or red teaming. I'm going to assume that you've potentially done, some self-study of your own, which is kind of point number 2. And then you're working on point number 3, which is, the certifications that you want to take. So it sounds like you've got a good plan. Sounds like you've outlined it out. I think the 2 certs that you have here are excellent examples of, certs that you can do to prepare yourself for the career field. Make sure that you're acknowledging, right? So I've got a little bit of a cynical approach when it comes to CISSP, right? CISSP looks great on paper, and it's definitely something that, HR teams look for when it comes to, putting you up for management. But there are actually, time and grade, if you will, requirements for CISSP. You will have had to have been in cybersecurity for a certain length of time to qualify to actually get a CISSP. And so I don't know that you'll actually have the amount of time that you need to for CISSP by the time you get out of college. So I wouldn't stress too hard about this, especially if you're looking to spend 1 to 3 years before trying to get into a security management level. I think you'll have more than enough time to try to go after your CISSP kind of at that point in time. Now, to the more controversial question, right, on OSCP. Having taken my OSCP, I can tell you that, this is the part that annoys me the most about OSCP. I taught for the SANS Institute for 5 years. I taught for the United States Air Force for a number of years. I helped the Air Force kind of stand up their functional training unit for cyber. Did courses like intermediate network warfare training, and as well as the the job qualification training for some of the offensive jobs that are out there in the Air Force, and that try harder mentality, I think, is the toxicity level that we have inside of our career field, especially on the offensive side, that is no longer conducive to the type of people or the type of career folks that we're wanting to bring into this. As a matter of fact, I actually wrote about this on LinkedIn. You can actually go out and read one of my articles on LinkedIn about this, and see that I think that it's this level of toxicity that has really stunted the growth of our career field. And so for no other reason of what you have listed here other than this right here, I would encourage you to shy away from OSCP, because I don't think that OSCP is a toxic free type of qualification. And quite honestly, if you're on the eLearn security path, that you've got right here, I think that you're actually doing really, really, really good in terms of pursuing down that. And I know that after EJPT and ECCPT, there's actually other eLearn security courses that I would highly recommend for you to pursue as well, including some advanced, pen testing extreme courses. They just released their V2 course as well, whereby you can, get something that I would call pretty close to an OSCP level cert, without, kind of getting beaten down by the community over this try harder mentality. With that being said, I think, getting, all three of these certs, like I just want to make sure that you're not, focusing too hard on certifications more than you are actually learning. So one of the things that I would also try to encourage you to do is that, some of these certs are going to have labs and lab content that you're going to be able to do with it. You may or may not get some lab content during your undergrad study, depends on the program that you actually have here. But I would definitely make sure that you do enough, CTFs. You just heard me talk, in the other post about, boss of the SOC and things like that. And there's also a significant number of red team CTFs that are out there that I would absolutely encourage you to take part of as well, because those are going to help you far and away more, especially if this is your goal, right? Real life pen test experience. There is nothing like, you creating the scenarios for yourself with which you want to learn. Responder is a perfectly good example of that, right? And there's going to be some haters right there that are going to be like, LOL responder, right? Whatever the case is. But in reality, if you've ever sat in an information security organization and bought a pen test from Verizon, from Spectre Ops, from, insert company here, right? One of the first things that they're going to do is they're going to drop a box on your network and they're going to run responder and they're going to pull hashes right off the network. And so if you want to talk about doing a real life pen test, right? None of these courses are going to teach you how to run responder, right? So you're going to have to do that on your own. There's no substitute for standing up a Go Fish environment, out on DigitalOcean and practicing phishing some dummy mailboxes that you've got, with something like a Go Fish environment. Download, if you go back a couple videos ago that I had, where I talked about C2 environments and things like that. You can actually stand up your own C2 environment like Empire or something like that, make your own payloads, and then simulate an entire corporate phishing exercise all on your own. It doesn't require a whole lot of money, and you'll get more value out of that from a real life pen test perspective, versus these certs that you have here. Kind of to your second question, I see we got a chat from It's Centurio about studying during lockdown. Let me finish this section right here, Centurio, and then I'll answer your question real quick. Is my career plan all right to get hands dirty into pen testing before actually moving to the management level? I think your plan is absolutely right. What I would say is that I think your time frames are a little off. You kind of go from pen testing, red teaming in 1 to 3 years, and then security management level. And I think if I were to read into your message here a little bit, right, you're chasing this number right here. You're worried about being management by the time you're 31 years old. And I wouldn't stress about this too much, right? After 1 to 3 years of doing pen testing, you may or may not have a good grasp as to what it is that you want to do from a management perspective. You may actually, after 1 to 3 years of pen testing, realize that you want to go into threat hunting, or you want to go into blue teaming, or you want to go into risk assessments, or something completely different. And so I would actually say that your 1 to 3 years should be, you're focused on red teaming, but you're also focused on, what could potentially go into, other cybersecurity organizations. How do they work? How do they protect organizations? How does the IR team work? How does the IR team looking at your pen testing efforts, right? When you're going out there and doing pen testing, this 1 to 3 years could turn into a 5 to 10 year sabbatical as you try to, learn all the different aspects of a cybersecurity organization. And I think that would actually make you more well-rounded and make you actually more, more marketable, especially in this security management level, once you've proven that you've done a lot of other things. It's a very hard path to say, I'm pen testing, now I'm ready for management. Pen testing is literally only such a small part of an information security organization that doesn't make you ready to manage an entire cybersecurity, function inside of a cybersecurity team. Could you manage another red team? Sure. And if you're saying that you're going to go from pen testing and red teaming at the tactical level to managing a pen testing team, then that's a different conversation. But I think your time frame may be a little off, but I think what I would change mostly about this, right, is maybe you do pen testing and red teaming for a little while, and then maybe after 1 to 3 years, you're looking at other parts of a cybersecurity organization that may actually interest you more. OSCP is totally an HR filter, but what I will also say is that some interviews, most pen testing interviews that I've ever been in, actually do also give you an opportunity to do a hands-on as part of that interview, and so that's why I continue to get you to harp on doing some of the hands-on stuff. You hit the CISSP on the head right there. Your logic passes a sanity check, but you may actually have a hard time getting the folks at ISC Squared to sign off and giving you a CISSP just after 5 short years. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. If this is where your passion is, right up in here, I'd start here, and kind of getting back to my 4 things that you can do to get inside of information security. I would focus on pulling on that thread of red teaming, taking that rabbit hole as far as you feel like taking it, and then from there, kind of seeing where it goes and where you kind of go from there. So hopefully that's helpful. So now, moving back over to chat, we did get a chat while we were kind of digesting this Reddit post. Just a question. I'm currently struggling during lockdown in terms of studying. You've got any tips? Currently doing SOC analyst as a scholarship. I think now during lockdown is the easiest way to be doing any type of studying. YouTube, if you're capable of watching just hours and hours and hours of YouTube video, there's so much YouTube content out there for you to digest. I know that, and I mentioned this before, right? If you go out there, and if DEF CON and Black Hat have ever been kind of pipe dreams for you, where you've thought about going, but you can't afford the tickets, because I know Black Hat's, $3,000, usually to go to the in-person event, and there's the cost of going to Vegas, which if you've ever been to Vegas, is just not cheap. But I know that both Black Hat and DEF CON are moving to virtual settings this year because of the lockdown. Would absolutely highly encourage you to revisit, the idea of going to Black Hat and DEF CON in their virtual sense. I know that if you go to, a lot of the discords, like the blue team hacking village, the red team hacking village, the car hacking village, the wireless village, they're all looking at doing, virtual events as part of, DEF CON is canceled this year. And so those are still valuable, and they might actually be more fiscally, eligible for you. There have been several CTFs that have happened over the course of lockdown that I would highly encourage you to go out there and look for and try to get involved with as well. In terms of if you're doing a SOC analyst as a scholarship, if you're still listening, if you can respond, I assume that you're doing, some incident response type work. Wish we could have had this conversation maybe a week ago. We probably could have hooked you up with, information on how to get into Boss of the SOC, because that actually would have been a fantastic CTF for you to actually to go to and put your hands on. I can't praise enough how awesome Boss of the SOC is. But I would definitely look for, in terms of studying. No. It was last week. Fockets is in chat maybe, and I know Fockets went to Boss of the SOC. He can probably give you some details on what days it was, but I think it was like one day last week, Thursday or something like that. 1 day event. So, definitely have to look for other opportunities. Check Google, because Google usually has their CTF that also has some blue team components. But I tell you what, next stream, I will absolutely make a note to myself, and actually, if one of my moderators could make a note for next stream, we will do a CTF section on the next stream, and we'll cover blue team and red team CTFs on the next stream. And so if you tune into the next stream, or tune into the VOD that goes up after that, we'll break down some red team and blue team CTFs, and we'll carry this conversation over what types of CTFs you can do over the next stream. We'll kind of hit some of those up. But definitely YouTube content. If you have the pocket change, I would definitely encourage you to look at eLearn Security. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Fantastic. There's Boss Sock. Thank you very much for the mod for that. eLearn Security. Okay, good. You're good. Good. You're doing your EJPT. That's awesome. So after you get done with EJPT, they definitely have a ton of Blue Team content that's up there as well. I definitely wouldn't shy away from doing some of, like, they just released Threat Hunter. I would definitely do Threat Hunter as well. I think that's a fantastic course. So kind of hearing where you're going at, I think some of the things that I just kind of mentioned as well, from like an environment setup, you can go get you a very, very small DigitalOcean instance. And I'm serious, very, very small DigitalOcean instance. It'll cost you like $5 a month to have this DigitalOcean instance stood up. Open you up an SSH port, put like a super complicated password on it that you don't care about ever remembering, get you a free version of Splunk, have those logs go into Splunk, and just watch traffic and just quickly learn from there, just like how bad the internet is from like an attacker perspective, and start to kind of roll through looking at those logs. While I'm talking, can you kind of tell me like some of the work that you're doing as a SOC analyst, so that we can kind of maybe see what you're doing right now from a day-to-day work perspective? But what I would also say to that is anytime that you can create a lab environments are huge when it comes to really learning and doing your studying. And in lockdown, I think, it's really easy for us to say, well, let's go consume some YouTube content. There is quite a bit of YouTube content that's out there, but there is no mistake for hands-on experience. And even if you go back a couple streams, I think it was on my top 4 things to get into cybersecurity stream. One of the things I said is that when you go for that HR check, when you go for that interview, at least when I interview folks, when I'm looking to hire talent, hire candidates, I look at their resume and I look at their certifications, but I also ask them what types of things that they do on their own time. What labs do they have set up? What self-learning are they doing? I'll get into it with them and I'll say, tell me about your lab. What types of machines do you have set up there? What types of scenarios are you running? What are you learning from it? What are you trying to accomplish from it? And I'll really dive deep into that self-learning part of it, because I think that in our space, we have a unique requirement that you have to have your hands on, you have to be able to do stuff. There's a misconception, right? That so you're taking EJPT. If I recall correctly, I think that there are some labs with EJPT, but there's not much. But we have this misconception that we have to rely on vendors like eLearn Security or OSCP or SANS, or Cyberry or Udemy. I'm not trying to leave those guys out as well, right? To provide us with labs for those to be effective. And what I would say is that that's not true in the current state of where we are with cybersecurity. There's so much content and there's so much free stuff that you can do, even from a hands-on lab perspective, and it's not complicated to set up. And if you're in this space, it would actually behoove you to be able to do that type of stuff on your own. And so, hands down, would absolutely encourage you to do that. And so, hopefully that answered your question. If you got any more, then would love to do that, but we'll definitely do a CTF stream, because that's something we seem to have been talking about quite a lot here recently. Any kind of any other questions that we can get into here? While you guys are thinking about questions or writing those down, I want to thank everybody for tuning into the stream as always. I want to thank all of our followers on all 3 platforms. Appreciate all the support as we continue to try to bring this cybersecurity conversation really mainstream. Thanks for the great chats today from everybody who participated. It means a lot to me as thanks for subbing to YouTube. I appreciate it. As always, we try to take these streams, we'll cut them down in nice little consumable chunks and put them up on YouTube after the stream. And so, with that being said, finished a little early. Usually these go, about 2 hours, but we finished a little early with the content. With that, I'll say thanks again to everybody else who tuned in for the stream today. Have a fantastic Sunday, and keep up the good fight. And we'll see you again next time on Cyber Insecurity.